me try that again. We played Star Wars for 5 hours. 5 hours. Streams are 3 hours long, and that was 5 hours of Star Wars.
It was, but it was good. It was a really good session, though.
No, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got to play that long.
Oops.
But that meant going to bed at 1 a.m. and then doing this.
I wish we would have went to bed at 1 a.m.
Shh, I was being optimistic. You didn't have to tell everybody that.
I think we all finally fell asleep around like 2:30, 3.
Probably, yeah. And now I'm gonna give you some top-notch game mastering advice. You can expect that at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Hey, that's the best time to get advice.
I don't think it is.
I mean, sis are 2 a.m. and I don't want to do this at 2 a.m.
Welcome to the club, RPG chick.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder where Darth Brennan is. Him and Sith Iron Fist, they both had tons of questions about this.
Yeah, those nerds need to get in here so they can listen to our answers. It went live in our Discord. They should be here by now. Slackers. Right? Don't you like my Groot mug? I have so many mugs. I'm going to use a different one on every Coffee and Crates. Okay, so do we want to jump into things? Kind of. We can start out.
Yeah, I'm good with that. Do you want to just... Oops.
Yeah, well, our questions this week came from RPG Chick, Sith Iron Fist, and Darth Brennan. They were submitted in our Discord chat. So if you guys have any questions, you can join our Discord, or I mean, we'll take them on Facebook. You can message us. We'll take them here on Twitch. That's fine. But they asked them in our Discord general chat, and most of them had a theme towards game mastering. I know Darth Brennan, that's Michael. He game masters for our Star Wars campaign that we did for 5 hours last night. So he just wanted some ideas on, how to just improve, because he's already really good at being a game master, but he wanted some ideas. Sith Iron Fist is thinking about running like a short mini series campaign. I think he was looking at like Lost Mines or something. And he's thinking about running that on here, so you guys should stay tuned for that if that gets off the ground. And then RPG Chick is looking to game master and stream a couple of things on here in the recent future. So yeah, we're gonna give them some kind of advice, and hopefully it helps.
We're not complaining about it.
Oh no, I'm definitely not complaining. It was
very
awesome.
Very seldom do we get to have a cool 6-hour session like that. So
right. Those are the best sessions, especially when it's Star Wars.
Yeah, so
I got to be a Star Wars character for 5 hours.
Who gets to say that twice a month?
Exactly.
Besides all the people at Disney.
I'll never forget that one time that we played Divine, and we played for, what was it, 8 hours?
Something absurd, and it was like a spur of the moment decision.
Yeah, we decided to play a campaign. It was a Saturday night, I think, but we started at 6, and then we stopped playing, and I want to say it was 3 or 4 in the morning when we stopped. We just kept going.
And then we all passed out.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely not complaining. Those are the coolest sessions.
Hey, there he is.
Hey, we were stalling for you, Darth Brennan.
It was a dungeon.
It was. And it was awesome.
All right, so do you want to get this one underway? I'm sure Brandon is probably asleep.
I mean, you're not wrong. So yeah, our first question is, it's a lot about prepping. And it's got a couple of points. So I'll just read over those, and then we can, go to each point. And the main question is, how much time do you spend prepping for a campaign? And then Sith Iron Fist had a little a little subcategory for it of, do you always have a BBG? And if you do you create that when you're creating the campaign? Like if it's a homebrew, if you start writing the homebrew, do you first thing you do is make your BBG, or do you let your players do some stuff and kind of decide that later on? The next like subcategory is when it comes to how long you spend prepping, does that differentiate depending on if it's a homebrew or a module? What happens when the party completely derails what you're planning on doing that time? And then when you should and shouldn't fudge rolls, which I think is always a really interesting topic to discuss. Especially because lately when in our Roll20 campaigns, we stopped. We show our rolls, so you can't fudge them as much. But yeah, so that's going to be what we talk about for that one. What are your thoughts on just prepping?
BBEG stands for Big Bad Evil Guy, for anybody new. Now, what was your question, Kyle? Did you want me to kick this one off?
Yeah. Tell me your thoughts.
So when it comes to good morning, everybody in here. No, my thoughts when it comes to prepping for a campaign, I don't want to overwork myself and think that I have to have every minute detail down, because that goes hand in hand with derailing a campaign. If you plan every minute detail down to exactly where everything is going to happen, you're going to have no idea what to do when they don't follow exactly what you just did. And the amount of time I spend, it really depends on what chunk of the campaign is getting done. So if we're in a chapter of a book, so for example, for Descent into Avernus, right now we're in a very combat heavy environment. I don't prep for that the same way that I prepare for lots of role play and character development sessions, because grinding out XP like that is just a different process. So it's better to know what you're going to be like, what the party's going to be fighting, and how they interact in combat, more so than the way like you would interact with somebody in a tavern, for example. And so I think that like maybe like, so if I'm prepping like lots of combat stuff, maybe an hour. But if it's role hours over a period of a week, I try not to put too much into it, because you don't know how much the party is gonna work at it. You don't know how. And my biggest thing that helps me is I like to make like bullet points of things that I want the party to achieve. So like if I want something to happen where you guys meet somebody and that's it, whether you go to the place I thought you'd meet them at versus where you actually meet them, doesn't matter, as long as that bit of information gets to the characters.
Yeah, those are some good points. That was real nice. I mean, covered everything that I've. I agree with you a lot. On the whole, if you know it's going to be a combat session, I mean, I'll read over like the monsters a little bit or whatever they're planning on fighting to see like what they can do. Or recently, I've tried a lot to work on like battle tactics. I totally got that book. The Monsters Know What They're Doing, and I've been reading that a lot. I know Darth Brennan has it too. It really helps a lot, where like I might see what you guys should be fighting and then kind of plan like what they would do in that fight. But other than that, I mean, I don't do a lot of prepping when I know you guys are going to be fighting, especially like with like examples from Tomb. There will be some sessions where you guys are just wandering through the jungle for the whole session fighting stuff. I'm not going to waste time prepping for that. But like one of our most recent sessions, you guys went to Nangalore, which I knew was going to be a big roleplay place, and I prepped for that for almost, I mean, maybe like an hour a day for maybe a week. I read over it just to make sure I knew who was in there, and I in my head I was mentally prepping for like any scenario, like if you guys did this, what would this person that you're talking to do? If you guys did this, what would they do? And so yeah, I prepped a lot more for that than I usually do. So yeah, I totally agree with prepping more if there's role play stuff, and then not prepping as much if you're just planning on fighting things for an entire session, because it's kind of a waste. But on Michael's point, I don't completely agree with Michael's point about not ever writing dialogue.
Oh yeah, I write. I don't write dialogue.
I don't write like I know what he means. Don't write like a monologue for a character. But like I usually, if I know there's going to be a lot of role playing stuff, I write like a couple of bullet points of like points that they would hit, or like if they have like weird like ways that they talk, I would like write down like different inflections that they would talk. I'll do that and stuff like that when it comes to role playing. But yeah, that I really agree with you on your explanation of that.
With the dialogue, so the group that we play with, we've started to really grow to know them and how they play, and I think that's important. Just for developing anything is in a campaign setting. When if I write dialogue for key parts, I write with the intent of knowing who's going to answer the question, or how they might respond.
Yeah,
so
like you know what character is going to speak up, so you write what they would say to that character.
Yes, okay. Or like what I'll do is like I'll make a bullet point that says like, so for let's say Descent into Avernus, typically the person that talks is either Toto or Cena. They have two very different ways of speaking to people. So what I'll do is like I'll write out my small dialogue, and then have like if Toto responds, and then have like lead with this, and then put if Cena responds, start with this. Because they're gonna ask different questions. But that's just a part of getting to know your group. Just like I would do something different if Zatsa or Beefka were to answer or try to answer the question or respond to somebody.
Gotcha. No, yeah, that's a good idea. To kind of know your players and what they'll do. That's what I had to do a lot for Tomb with the Nangalore thing. I was super worried about you guys because I know that you guys are very punchy. And as soon as things don't go your way, you usually end up fighting something. So yeah, I had to prep a lot of what would happen if you guys did get into that situation where you would get a little punchy. So yeah, but then you guys surprised me, and you role-played the heck out of it. And you didn't die.
Let's see. I think that pretty much nails the head in the coffin on that first point.
Probably, yeah.
The next one is the Big Bad Evil Guy development. For the Big Bad Evil Guy, obviously, if you're playing a module, then yes, you already have your Big Bad Evil Guy established.
Wizards of the Coast kind of did that for you. You're welcome.
If you're playing a homebrew, I personally feel that like what is it? So for me, when I make a homebrew, I think of what I want the party to be dealing with first. So like the Big Bad is not the first person that I write. I write the idea of what I want in the campaign. So like I've been working on an Eberron campaign for our channel for a little while now, and my first idea was what do I want the party to accomplish? And then after I figured that out, I tried to figure out what type of character would fit that scenario. So I guess with the Big Bad, he develops over time, but I also have a rough sketch of what I want him to be by the time they need to approach him.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely, yeah, I don't think I write the BBG right away. I definitely think of like what I want the, like, what the players are going to be doing most of the time. You know what I mean? Like, is it going to be
Mm-hmm.
fighting things all the time? Is it going to be sneaking around and trying to get information most of the time? I definitely think of like that. And then what kind of BBEG fits that? Like, if you're planning on having people sneak around all the time to like take down an organization, it doesn't make sense to have a giant demon to be the BBG that has an intelligence of 4. You know what I mean? Like, you got to think about that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then usually after I establish that, the BBG is probably one of I pick the setting of the campaign that I'm planning, and then the BBG is probably the second thing that I make. I usually have a good idea of what I want them to be before I start writing the rest of the campaign. Because I think the rest of the campaign definitely deals around like what their motives are and what the players are going against with what their motives are. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's probably the first or the second thing that I do is make my BBEG, honestly. Like for Harry Potter, I figured out what I wanted the campaign to be, and then I have the BBEG all done and ready to go.
Yeah, that's what I did was
Mm-hmm.
I finished my what I would like. Um, I finished what I wanted. Um, sorry, my campaign to be, and then I began creating the
Mm-hmm.
big bad. But another thing that I think is kind of important is as your story develops, because it is a homebrew, you might come to find out that that big bad that you built was just a milestone. He may not
Yeah.
be the final one. You know what I mean? Like you
Mm-hmm.
might
Yeah. I
your characters might get to level 6, and you're like, oh, they have greatly surpassed what this guy is capable of. I
yeah.
might need to bring someone new.
I totally agree with that. And that goes a lot with like the prepping thing. Like, you can prep for that all you want to, but once you start playing, you might realize, yeah, I need to do something different. This isn't going to work. And then I'm not saying get rid of that BBG, but now make one above it. Now build the campaign even further, and that makes for a longer, more in-depth campaign. So that's just a win-win.
I say we did that kind of with our miniseries, our All Hallows Eve miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
We had these different characters that kept building up and building up and building up
Mm-hmm.
until we finally met the last person. And I think that helped to develop the story and kept everybody engaged. So
Mm-hmm.
um, I just like that idea. And then Darth Brennan is asking about statting BBEGs.
That's a little bit of
How?
a tougher one.
Yeah. So how I look at it when I build a big bad, since they're going to be the end all be all.
Okay.
Um yeah, I what I do is I look at them as if they're going to be a playable character. Um
Mm-hmm.
I start them at level 1 and I develop them until I feel like, oh, that this encounter goes here. And when I was reading, prepping for my Eberron campaign, they make a really good suggestion on how to prepare bad guys, and I really liked it. And it's that the bad guy develops over time with the characters,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was really cool. So like they might run into him when they're level 3, but this guy might be maybe just level 4, level 5, just a
Mm-hmm.
little bit stronger than them or the same level as them, and he or she or they have to sneak away to to get away, and then you may not see them for 20 sessions. You come back and you're level 7, and this guy is also level 7 now. And so that progression I think is really cool as well.
Yeah. I agree. That's a really good way to do it, especially if like you're a newer GM. Because stat blocks in D&D can be intimidating, and they can like there's just a lot on them, especially for higher level characters. If you really want to know, go look up like a CR 21 to 23 character. Their stat block takes up a whole page on the monster manual, and it's just a lot to remember. So especially if you're first starting out, you know how a character sheet runs and how all that stuff works. Just make them a PC, and then maybe like if your character's going to be an evil wizard, look at like the Archmage stat block. Maybe take some of their abilities that they have and shove that onto your character sheet or stuff like that, or take that stat block and then add some of your character sheet points onto that. Just kind of mix it together. I definitely, when like statting it, I definitely look at the monsters in like the monster manual to make sure like that's how like for overpowering and stuff like that, or underpowering, to make sure that it's where it should be. Like if I'm planning on making an evil demon, I'll look at some of the demons and be like, if I want him to be a CR 21, I'll find something close to that and make sure that the stats kind of match. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'd say that's a really good idea. Just taking maybe even like taking like those generic blocks
Yeah.
and just changing them to what you'd like. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that idea too. Because then you already know that the stat block is balanced. Because to me, that's the hardest part.
Yeah, that's the scariest part about making your own big bad evil person. Is you don't want to, the first time the characters meet them, the characters completely destroy them, or the big bad evil guy completely destroy the characters.
Yeah, I agree with that because that's it's just very tricky. I watched lots of people like make them and try to make them, and I just feel like there's a very thin line between a slaughter in either direction.
Right. And the worst part is that you don't realize where that line is until you're like halfway through that combat.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's very hard to like weigh that out. You could sit there and like plan out the scenario about what would happen, but like if the dice rolls are against the party and with you, you still can't do it. You know what I mean? It's just that it's a very tricky thing to do.
My thing with building your big bad, whenever you if you're gonna start from the ground up, when you roll your stats, I think the biggest thing that you can do is just remember what your character's trying to accomplish. Because you don't really have to assign them per se a particular class. So if you want, but like if you want them to be intelligent, and you want, maybe look at being a wizard. If you want them to be like a brute that comes in and bashes their head in, look at barbarian or fighter. Like, make sure that you don't sacrifice those like core principles of character building to try to develop this like godlike figure.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like we said last session about stealing things from like pop culture, steal things from the monster manual. Dude, you know, there's a bajillion books written with all this stuff in there. Just take some of it. If you like an ability a monster has, take it and put it on your guy's stat block.
Yeah, giving them morals.
Yeah, definitely think about that too, just their backstory.
Yeah, that one, I think the morals would be really, really good because you might be able to, I think it would make for a valuable role play moment, possibly.
Yeah, definitely. Think about that, how how the characters would react to meeting them and stuff like that, or how like their personality and stuff like that. Because really the BBG and all your NPCs, those are your characters, so make them just as interesting as the PCs are. You got a good campaign going.
Then I guess the next point is what? Derailing, like prep versus improv.
Yeah, like what you do when you've done all of this prep and your party stops and says, let's go to that other city instead of the city that you wanted us to go to. Right, Darth Brennan? Iki remembers.
He'll always remember.
So yeah, what do you do to prep for like derailing and stuff like that?
So, like I said before, I'm very much, whenever I play a character, I'm the talker of the group, or I enjoy thinking on my feet. So improv does not bother me whatsoever. But some people it does. Like, it's not everyone, especially beginners, are just going to go, oh, you're not going to do everything that I planned tonight? That's cool. I've got a backup plan. Like, that doesn't happen. So when I improv, when I do improv, what I think about is, okay, what in the session that I have written for you guys, what can I still give you over in this other city? So maybe you're supposed to meet a particular person,
Mm-hmm.
and that person is not going to be in the city whatsoever, but maybe somebody else who has heard rumors could really push the narrative of, hey, you need to go see that person that I told you to go see.
Mm-hmm.
And then next would be like, if they just want to do like a shopping montage or going to the bar and hanging out. There's, to me, that's where things get the most interesting and probably the most difficult also, because now you've got to create these characters on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when I think of, like, if we're going shopping, let's say they want to go look for clothing. The very first thing I think about is when they open the door, they're probably not going to go into, a half orc is probably not making fine linens. Like,
Mm-hmm.
or things like as soon as they start telling me what they want to do, I start narrowing down the options of that could be available there.
Mm-hmm.
That way you're not going, oh God, what is this? What do I do for this? How do I do this? I just try to think of things in like a linear kind of thing, like, oh, this goes here, this goes here. Okay. Another thing you can do was, or when they say they want to go in, just ask them, what do you guys want to do while you're here?
Mm-hmm.
Because if they give you like an agenda, you've now taken back some of the control in the session.
Yeah.
Like there's like an ebb and flow to control for a session like that in D&D, in an RPG. But being able to gain some of that back and go, okay, these are the points I want to hit while we're here, and this is what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've given yourself a prep in a sense. So now you're not thinking you've wasted all your time and you have no idea what to do. Do you have anything you like?
No,
to
I
add?
totally agree. Or even if you think about it, your players don't know what you prepped. So if they're like going to like if you have all this prep for this one town that you needed them to go to do all this stuff and talk to all these people, and they go, yeah, no, we're gonna go to this town and buy some stuff. They don't know that you made this other town or what you put in the other town. You can just take all that and move it to this new town. If like especially if you're like super new at and not super comfortable with like the improv, they don't know that you made this other town or what you did in that other town. Just take it and plop it in this town that they are going to, and now they can do what they want to do. They can go on their shopping montage. They can do all that, but all your characters that you needed them to meet and talk to, they're all there now, and you can just be like, when they go to buy something, they're in the store there, and that type of thing. They don't know what you prepped, so you can just take your prep and move it around.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at as well. If you have, and like I said, it's like when I prep, I don't prep like down to the last detail. I prep depending, like if we're gonna play 4 hours,
Mm-hmm.
I'll prep 20 bullet points
Yeah.
of what I think the characters can probably find out or what they need to find out.
Mm-hmm.
And I might make a list of like importance. Usually not. Usually I find if I'm putting down a bullet point, it's probably important to the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I'll do is, like, if they go somewhere else, I'll go, these are relevant bullet points you could find in a city. These are relevant you could find in the forest meeting somebody. Like that's how I do it. That way you're still using the prep that you had to make meaningful play on something you didn't intend to do.
Yeah, definitely. And like just like don't be afraid of derailing, because it's going to happen. Like you can't stop it. That's like the point of a role-playing game. You gotta the characters do what the characters want to do. They have to have that that they have to have control every once in a while. I mean, it's the character's story. So if they want to go do something, don't be afraid of improvising some stuff, because they're never going to know that you improvised it. You could have all that written down and they'll never know. Just be confident in what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that I have anything else really on that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look like the chat had any more like sub questions to it. If we want to go to that last one for our first question is when do fudge rolls?
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting one. when you use
There's
fudge rolls, buddy?
there's so many different ideas to when to fudge rolls.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the one that I love the most when it comes to fudging rolls, if you're going to do it, is you you fudge rolls to help, never harm the party, because um, I think whenever if you're in combat and you've got a guy who's about to, you got a character that's about to go down, and you miss,
Mm-hmm.
you don't take that as go, oh, I critted, or oh, that's a hit, and go ahead and take them down. I think that um I just don't think that's a good DM tactic, but
Mm-hmm.
everyone has their own way of DMing. And then when helping them, maybe if if they roll, they've built this whole big plot line, and I've seen this time and time again. You devise all this, and everything comes down to one roll. They roll like a deception check, and they roll an 8, and you're like, cool.
Yeah.
Your whole 2-session plan
Uh-huh.
has just now hinged on the roll of an 8.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I've always thought is interesting, where before you tell a player to make a roll, think if that roll is necessary. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you've planned for 2 sessions to come up to this point where they have to tell this lie to this person, if they can role play their ass off and get through that lie really well, do they really need to make that roll? Because if they make that roll and they, like you said, and they get an 8, now you're screwed. And now either you have to take back that roll and be like, yeah, an 8's good enough, when everybody knows that an 8 isn't good enough.
Yeah.
Or you have to stick to your guns, and now they didn't get the deception check through, and now you're derailing your own campaign. You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely a time and a place for like skill checks and stuff like that.
Yeah, you just got very like open room.
Okay.
No, you're good now.
You have to stop and think, do I really need the skill check here? Do I really need them to make this roll? Because if they don't make this roll, is it going to screw up everything? That type of thing.
And so what I do, if we get to that point, you come down to it, you make the roll, it's an 8, or it's not sufficient, and we all, like, as players, you see the 8 and you're like, yep, this is the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think of what counter roll a person would have. So if you're trying to deceive them, maybe the guard is going to roll an insight check.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you fudge the roll. You go, oh, I rolled a nat 20 on here, but I got a 5.
Yeah, exactly. That's where, you could say it worked. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Just because then, you haven't wasted anywhere between, because most sessions go, I would imagine 3 to 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So now you haven't wasted 6 to 10 hours of time before this session
Mm-hmm.
just for it to go away. So I think that's my philosophy, is to fudge rolls to aid the party, but never to harm them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and everyone has their own way of playing, but for me, I like to see the party succeed,
Mm-hmm.
or at least they succeed, but one role should not decide their failures. I think that there should be an accumulation of mishaps that brought them to that point.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, and that's where you have to stop and just like think, like, if you are about to make a roll and you're like, if I make this roll, I'm gonna have to fudge it. Just maybe don't make the roll. You know what I mean? You don't have to always make that roll.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what RPGs are. You're just telling a story. The dice are just what make it a game. So, like, every once in a while, you can just stop and be like, yeah, do we really need the dice right now? Or is this just a really good storytelling moment that we can just go with?
And I think that's really important to new characters too, or new players, because lots of players, I think, inherently go, oh, do I need to make a roll?
Mm-hmm.
And if you tell them no, they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, not everything requires a roll.
And I think that that's just like a misconception. I think that people hear of Dungeons and Dragons and know that you need dice and you need this and that.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, it's just telling a story.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really like that idea that you don't always need dice. Like I think there have been sessions, we've just been like hanging out playing and we maybe roll the dice 10, 12 times over
Mm-hmm.
4 hours just because, and because we love to role play.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So it's not about the amount of dice you roll and all that. I think Kyle's point was really good that you only need to make a roll when you feel it's absolutely necessary,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which also reduces the amount of times you'll need to fudge a roll as well.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely I agree with your point about don't hinder the party with a fudge roll. Definitely help them with a fudge roll. Um that type of thing.
Yeah, RPG Check said sometimes the failures make the story so much more interesting, and that's true. And I don't want you guys to think that we just go, "Oh, you failed. It's okay. You can still succeed."
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about big moments that have been prepped for, hours on end. Now, because if you go in and you go, "Okay, you failed," well, now, like, there's only so much improv. Like, even being able to improv, what are you going to improv after this whole event has been set up?
Yeah.
Because you've probably prepped for them to pass, to progress the story, not regress the story into being, held in some barracks or having their stuff taken away from them. Um, it's just I think that's a DM call really,
Mm-hmm.
of which roles need to fail and which don't. And I think that as you DM more, it's easier to see okay, this one can fail because they need to learn something.
Yeah.
Their characters need to learn something. It should never be the DM is teaching the characters or the players a lesson for bad roles.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not something that should exist.
Yeah. Maybe like one way to think about it is like have failures be like character developing things. Maybe have successes be like story development things. You know what I mean? It's okay to have characters fail, but maybe have them fail to improve like their character, them personally. Don't have the entire party fail off of 1-8 that you rolled after they've been working so hard to do all this, and this one dice roll happened to just mess it all up. That type of thing.
So Darth Brennan put, like having the fail go through if it's something out of that character's skill level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I agree with that totally, because when you play as a player character, your character is in every aspect 9 times out of 10 better at doing everything than a common human in the game. Unless you have like a negative stat roll, but like, even like even a barbarian who probably, the dump stat for that particular character is usually intelligence. If you roll well and you have an 11 intelligence, you still are smarter than the average human. And so just because it's not in their skill level, I don't think that they should be punished for a bad roll, because there's still like rolls just happen sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's what he was trying to get at, but yeah, I don't per se, I don't really think that player characters have a skill level. Like they do excel in other skills more than others, like other ones, but very rarely are they not better than the common person in your setting.
Yeah. Or if you're talking about NPCs, Darth Brennan, because then maybe maybe like last night with like if we were talking to like a clone trooper or somebody like that, and we tried to deceive him, seeing through that lie might be out of that clone. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. We'll see. We'll move on to the next question.
Yeah,
we can come back to that. To work that out. So the next question is how. Oh, this is a good one. How do you address difficult players and toxicity at the table?
This is a good one, and it's also hard at the same time.
Oh yeah. Nobody
Um,
wants to be that. Wants that confronting.
yeah. Um, do you want me to start, or did you want to start this
Oh
one?
no, you're starting this
Oh,
one.
okay, cool.
Go.
Okay, so well, I think we'll tackle it one half at a time. So I'll start with difficult players.
Hmm.
Difficult players, I think, exist because the the wants and desires of the campaign were not specified at the beginning of your session. That's why I really like a session zero. I think it's really cool. You can discuss what you want in a campaign,
Hmm.
what you want the party to be like as a campaign, and how you intend to run your campaign. Um, okay, before I get deep into this, so the thing with yesterday with the party saying retracting the statement, what's a good way to punish that character for being dumb?
Gotcha.
Um,
So like when Tyler would just say, "I pull out my lightsaber," that type of thing.
I think you have to, and it's probably harder than like being at a table, when we play online. You have to figure out when the character when the person playing is in character and out of character.
Hmm.
Um, because like you said, like you don't want to punish somebody or you don't want to punish the party if they're just joking around having a good time. Like you don't want to be like, "Oh, you said it, now it happened," because realistically in our particular Star Wars setting, we know that Jedi are being hunted. So Tyler, being a very well-versed player and playing for a long time, knows that the correct thing to do is not pull out his lightsaber in front of a bunch of Imperial troopers. Um, in the same way that if you were standing, around a bunch of guards talking to a king, and the wizard says, "Cast fireball in the room." We definitely know the wizard's not actually going to cast fireball in the room. Um, and that could just be, you know, um, their personality. And I think that's what's important is figuring out someone's personality, because you don't want to punish play people or like the players for just goofing off. Like, yes, goofing off is part of the game, but you also want it to be serious. Um, but yeah, you don't want to misconstrue things. And that's why, like last night when whenever you're like, do you actually do that? I think that's very important to ask. So I think you handled that situation the right way, Michael, because you don't want to just punish them and not, go, are you joking or are you serious? Like, make it that quick, and then they have to make that decision. Um, I think that's a good way to address those kinds of things.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I guess we'll get back to our other question. Difficult players, like I was saying before. Um, yeah, your wants and needs were not specified at the beginning of the campaign, so now you've got this player who doesn't want to be part of this particular party, or they don't want to do the other things that the other party does, that the party's doing, and and then they have the not desire, but they have their right to choose what their character does, which is fine. But if your party's like, yes, we want this to be a very role play session, and this particular person hates role play, and he wants, dungeon crawl after dungeon crawl, because they like to use all the abilities that they've got and this and that and the other, then maybe, and there's nothing wrong with this, maybe that person doesn't need to play in your session. And that's okay. Like, if you guys want just very different things, why would you put yourselves through a difficult player?
Hmm.
Like, because then the game's not fun for you or the party, and it's also not fun for this other player. Um, so I think having a session 0 is super important because that gets rid of difficult players the difficult player aspect, because they know that, hey, this doesn't fit for my play style. I don't want to be here. Because you're investing a lot of time when you go play. You're playing sometimes, even if it's just once a week. Everybody works, has a lot of stuff to do, and you've dedicated usually a significant portion of your day off to play this game. So why would you waste it doing something you don't want to do?
Sorry. Blobby the Blobfish might be just as good as the great Hoogly Googly Moogly the other day.
Hello, Blobby the Blobfish. I'm glad you dropped in today. I hope you're having a great time, and I hope you enjoy our coffee and crits.
Yeah, I totally agree. Having like a session 0 or like a sit down before you, like, especially if you're planning on running a huge campaign. You sit here as a GM and you write. Campaigns last years, and you write all this stuff. You spend all your time writing this. You don't want to spend the next year, 2 years of your life having somebody who absolutely hates what they're doing and just feels like they have to be there because they were there at session 1. They can't just leave. That's definitely like a good point, is to have a session 0 or like a sit down before you play and say, my campaign does this. This is what I've written. This is what you guys will be doing. If you don't like that aspect of the game, you might not fit in this campaign. If the whole campaign is going to be very role-play-y, and like you said, somebody loves just fighting everything, stop and say, do you really think you should be in this campaign? Or should you go find a Tomb of Annihilation module at your local comic book store and play in that? That's definitely like something to think about. And then like if you don't have that session 0, or like you have that session 0 and this person's like, yeah, totally, I'm down for that, and then you find out later on, they aren't really as down as they were said when they came on, it's okay to stop. Not in the game. I definitely think like if you have to talk to a difficult player, to do it outside of the game. Finish the game, try to have as much fun as you can. But then like after the session, be like, listen, I don't know if you agree, but this isn't working. Either something needs to change, or we're gonna have to figure out something else. You know what I mean? It's okay to sit down and talk. And that's definitely like the best way to do it, is to talk to people. Yeah, like, I mean, these are role-playing games. They're just a conversation. It's okay to have a conversation outside of the fact and talk about that type of thing. Don't be that GM where if a player isn't doing what you want them to do, that you just punish them every session and make them even angrier, because then you're just gonna keep building up, and it's just gonna keep getting worse and worse. It's okay to talk to people. It's okay to be like, listen, this isn't working.
Yeah, and you should be comfortable with talking to people and having that conversation, because someone else might be too, like you were saying, they might be too nervous or scared to have the conversation. And I think as a DM or a GM, whatever you're playing, it's important for you to be able to put that foot forward for not only yourself, but also the other people playing that game. I think that's pretty good with difficult players. So the second half is potential toxicity at the table. I guess this breaks down into, when you say toxicity, are these just like comments that shouldn't be made at the table, rude remarks, like things of that nature? Because I think in a controlled environment where I don't want to say you're like hand picking or cherry picking your players, because that's not what D&D is really about. I mean, you're welcome to play with your friends and things, but D&D is about building a community, and that's what RPGs are for. I think that session 0 goes into toxic players, or are you asking for like specific scenarios? I guess that's what I'm curious about. Do you have any points? I guess my thing is, I need something more specific than just potential toxicity, because I think that's defined under difficult player.
Yeah, I definitely think yeah, that goes where like maybe the player, like, you had the session 0 and the player said that they were totally into it, and then you get through a couple sessions and they start becoming that difficult player. Like, this is where the toxicity is, like, if they're you know, being rude to other players, constantly being rude to NPCs, even when it's unnecessary. Like, maybe they just built a bad character, you know what I mean? Maybe still, I think the best way to handle it is to, outside a session, sit down with them one-on-one and be like, listen, I've noticed this. All the other players have noticed this. Why are you being like this? Is it just your character? Did you just make a character that is a little bit of an asshole? Is it because you don't like being here? Do you not like playing? Is it because this campaign isn't the setting that you thought it was going to be and you just don't enjoy playing in this setting anymore? Because maybe that's where, I mean, you can write players off. Maybe that's where you can stop and say, do you want to continue to be in this campaign? And if you are going to continue to be in this campaign, this is going to have to change. Other players are not having fun. The campaign, like, this could go along with like the derailing thing if they're constantly doing stuff like NPCs. The campaign is getting ruined because of how your character has been like that type of thing. Like, honestly, a lot of it is just sit down and talk to these people, figure out why they're being this way, and if there is a solution for it. Because if it is just, well, that's how my character would act, be like, okay, then we either need to have something happen where your character's personality changes, or I'm gonna write off your character and you're gonna make a new one, that type of thing. Or maybe not like a super ultimatum like that, but be like, these are our options. We can do this, or this, and if you don't like any of those options, then it's time to think of going to a different game or something else, that type of thing. Did Michael give us a good point in the chat?
Yeah, hold on one second. So, I'll address that in just a second, Michael. But Blobby the Blobfish, we are discussing right now how to handle difficult players or potential toxicity at a gaming table for an RPG. But Coffee and Crits is designed to go over just different aspects of role-playing games and maybe bring points that other people are seeking out. And so with your point, it says, so when a character you didn't expect to make an offensive remark says one and makes another player uncomfortable. So, with that, are you saying that these both characters are in character, or is this out of character remarks? Because, in character, that's something that can be dealt with as a role play moment. I feel, I mean, depending on the severity of the remark.
Depending on how they're being, and how it's a very touchy kind of subject. Like,
yeah, it's very
touchy.
Say
something in character, if their character that's just the way they are for some reason, and they say something inappropriate to another character, and that character, like, the character is offended, maybe that character can be like, you know what, I didn't agree. Like, in character, that's a role play moment where you could do that. Should it be said? That's something that you can address after the session. If you guys can get through it in a roleplay manner, address it after the session. If they're being rude out of game to another player, again, maybe be like, that wasn't cool, don't do it again. But don't stew on it, you know what I mean? If you're 2 hours into a 4-hour session, don't sit there and spend the next hour like yelling at this person or telling this person off. Tell them, that was not okay, don't do it again. And then after the session, talk about why and what needs to change.
Absolutely, yeah. I just think that, yeah, they're character, like, in character and out of character are two very separate things. Mm-hmm. So if it's two characters disagreeing, and it could be a controversial in-world subject, that maybe they don't see eye to eye on. But if it's something out of character,
okay, yeah. So what?
Oh, I was reading down here. the example is Kira and Rhea in
Mm-hmm.
our Divine Intervention campaign that we used to play.
Mm-hmm.
So in that, um, was it that both? So
Okay,
from
so
my
here's the
understanding of it,
backstory. Kira was a character who, for some reason in their backstory, didn't like shifters, which another character was a shifter in the game. And that character made, this is where I think it goes, like, it blurs the line between out of game and in game, because they did it multiple times in game. The character was racist towards this other character because in their backstory they didn't like shifters. And I get that's part of their backstory, but one time they did it one time, and our GM told them that that wasn't cool, not to do it again. And they continued to do it towards this character, and they continued, not even if they weren't being racist, they always showed hostility towards this character. I definitely think that's something that needs to be addressed. I get that it's in character, and I get that it's part of their backstory, but if it's something that is obviously rude towards another race, like even
it's a hindrance towards the overall campaign.
exactly.
That's
Even if a character, like, if that character is racist for any reason, which no character should be like blatantly racist against another race. If this is Dungeons and Dragons, there's races everywhere. I get maybe not liking a race, like the elves not liking dwarves, that type of thing. I get that, but they're not racist towards each other. They just don't agree with each other and don't like each other. You know what I mean? That's a completely different thing. But blatantly being like racist towards another race in Dungeons and Dragons, or any role-playing game, it's just always going to be a hindrance. That's what these games are about. That's why there's 30 different races you can be in Dungeons and Dragons right now.
And it's never okay to tell someone how they can and can't play their character, but if that becomes an issue and it continues to happen session over session, maybe you should sit down with the particular person and maybe discuss their backstory. Because like, let's say they love playing this game with you guys. They love playing it. They love everything about it. And, but that one particular thing is really bothering some of his characters, like some of the other players. Then maybe you should just sit down with them and be like, hey, why does your character act like this? Like, what's the reasoning behind it? Because, okay, so you said because he fought in a war against them. So that may play a significant part into the way that his character views the world. So then what you would do is, if that continues to happen, sit down with them and be like, look, I understand what you're trying to do here, but it's not coming across the right way.
Yeah, exactly. And make sure like in that situation with fighting a war against them, that doesn't equate to like name calling and stuff like that, which is something that character was doing. They would blatantly call them like racial type slurs in D&D lingo, whatever you can do. That's not okay. Like, even though you're in character, even though we're talking about make-believe races, that's just being like a decent person, you know what I mean? And even though you're playing these characters in this game, and you might have a certain feeling towards a certain person or something like that, it's just, your character should also be somewhat of a decent, this is a role-playing game, you're working together. You should be somewhat of a decent person that's able to collaborate with people on some level. And being like that towards another character is just, for that entire campaign, it's going to cause a problem. And that's just, and to sound like a broken record, that's just something where out of session, you need to sit down with that person and be like, this is not okay, and it's not going to continue to happen. You're hindering the campaign, you're hindering other characters, you're upsetting other people. It's not okay.
And also remember, though, that there's an appropriate way to have that conversation. Don't, after the session, or if it happens, you don't have to breathe down that particular person's neck and tell them everything that they did wrong. That's not what we're like. That doesn't come across any better than what they did in the session. It's your job as the DM, if that's continuing to happen, to help fix it or facilitate a better writing environment, so that maybe like it doesn't continue to happen, or let's say he, like in this particular session, let's say this character he doesn't want to change his mind on, I don't like this particular race because of what happened in a war. Okay, that's his defining character thing. Then discuss with them ways to facilitate that. So maybe instead of being rude and name calling, maybe when it comes down to a big decision, like let's say someone, like you guys are fighting and it doesn't look good, does that character run away or do they help stay and fight? If, like, let's say it's just down to this particular session, it's this character and I believe it was shifters, right? Let's say it's just them, they're the only two left in the party, and do they leave them to fight on their own so they can live, or do they overcome that obstacle and help them fight to save their party? That, I just don't think that people think of those kind of interactions always, and so there's appropriate ways to use those kinds of things.
That, or as the GM, like when you're getting all these backstories, and if you see something that could be like I don't think that's a thing, like fighting a war against like that, like if that's a defining thing, then sit down with those two players and be like, okay, in this person's backstory, they say this about your, like, have that be a predetermined thing and predetermine how you want that, like, role play. You know what I mean? Don't, like, railroad, like, for lack of a better term, don't, like, railroad that into the campaign, but be like, this is how they feel about your type of people. How do you feel about that? And now you have both sides, and then you can say, okay, we're not going to do name calling, like set ground rules for how you can do this, but then they can still have that backstory, but you've set ground rules on how that backstory is going to get portrayed.
Absolutely. And that's all something that should be discussed in session 0.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, unless you have another point, we could just recap that second question because there was a lot of information there.
Yeah, that was a lot. Sorry, guys.
No, it's
it really
fine.
does just boil down to talk to people.
I think session 0s are so important. We do them with saving throws, and I've watched several other people do them, and I love them because you can have those conversations before you get 80 hours into a campaign invested. Talk to people.
And try to not do any of this in game. If you're sitting at the table with 6 people, don't patronize somebody for doing something. If it's super heinous, you can be like, that wasn't cool, don't do it again. But then end it there and then continue on with what you're doing and finish that game. And then at the end, once everybody's left, everybody's gone home, you're done hanging out, call that person. FaceTime them, Skype them, something. Say, hey, can you stay after for a minute when everybody leaves? I just want to talk to you, and have that conversation privately. Because if you just sit there and yell at this person in session in front of everybody, that's just going to continue to make matters worse.
Well, and so like RPG Chick said, she said a session 0 would have been ideal for that campaign. You're right, but like, and then also like Darth Brennan said, when we were playing that, I'm pretty sure the only people that had D&D experience were Kyle and I. I know Michael had a bit, but had never DM'd before. And so not knowing those tips and tricks and the things that we came here on Coffee and Crits to discuss, you learn from it.
Now we know better, and all of our campaigns after that have been
I would agree,
much better with that type of thing. Build those characters together. Build, like, I always like the idea, like, to steal something from Dungeon World, if you need to, build that whole world together. In Dungeon World, you sit down, you make your characters, and then you build the world off those characters. Like RPG Chick said, her character was the shifter in that campaign. She didn't know about the war that this other character said that they fought. That's like something where if you were in a session 0, they would say in their backstory, I fought this war against your people. and you'd be like, oh, cool, so maybe this, and this happened in that war, and that's why we don't agree with each other. That type of thing.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
but
our next question's a little bit easier, a little less heavy,
and it's a lot more light. Yeah, it's a lot more lighthearted.
There might not be quite as much to it. It's like, what's your favorite gameplay options, including like setting, like how you make your players meet to avoid those those tropes of D&D of you guys are in a tavern, and then we'll talk about like our favorite pre-made campaigns and why.
Yeah, so setting, I'm guessing like setting means like Faerun or different things of that. Most of my RPG experience has been with 5th edition. And it was it was based in Faerun, but I also really enjoy in a homebrewing and making my own world sometimes. So I guess it depends on what I'm trying to accomplish as to which setting I prefer. I might also choose something different than that. Like if we're going for more of like a futuristic vibe, I may not choose Faerun to put my things in, or Eberron, or I believe that there's some stuff about Greyhawk now for 5th edition.
Yeah, I think Greyhawk's from another edition and they moved it into 5th edition.
Yes, and so there's all those different settings, but I use Faerun a lot because that's what most of us play. We mostly play 5th edition, and that's where most of the content comes from. But just because something is set in Faerun doesn't mean you can't pull from other parts or aspects of D&D. But so I think probably for favorite setting of mine is Faerun. Did you have one, Kyle?
Yeah, I definitely I'm used to 5e, so I know the most about Faerun and stuff like that. But I definitely like the idea of like when you're writing a campaign, making your own setting. Just kind of like we have the Star Wars campaign, so the setting is obviously in a galaxy far, far away. I'm writing a Harry Potter campaign that will start streaming soon, so the setting is in like London and all over Europe and stuff like that. So I like the idea of making your own setting. We've always talked about making like a Hyrule campaign, that type of thing. Just you can steal one from somewhere if you want to build a campaign off of something, or just completely make up a place. You can make up an entire world and stuff like that.
I mean, that's what we did for our mini series. We made up an entire like city structure to portray that.
Yeah, and it wasn't like set in Faerun or anything like that. It was just we didn't really need a whole world, but we just built a couple of cities and like factions in the city. That's a lot of fun to just play around with, to think about what your world could be and stuff like that. And then you're not bound by, like, if you decide to build a campaign and you say, I'm going to build it in Faerun, and then like there's something about Faerun that you want to change, you're always going to have those people that are like, yeah, but in Faerun that doesn't happen. But if you stop and say, this is my setting, and make your own, then you don't have those problems.
Yeah, so I haven't I know this is like one of the most sacrilegious things, but I don't watch a lot of Critical Role. So Wildmount I know nothing about. But I mean, if that's your favorite setting, pray for Jake. If that's your favorite setting, then yeah, you absolutely use it. And the great thing about using Wildmount is there's literally a campaign by the creator that you can watch for reference and ideas. So that would definitely show you how dare. But yeah, that's I guess where I'll go with that, is that if you want, like, to each their own. Like if you love the world that was created by Matt Mercer, then of course use it, because that's where you're going to be the most successful in enjoying what you write.
Yeah, do something that you're comfortable with. Don't, like, I would not go and write a campaign in like Greyhawk, like we were talking about, because I don't know a lot about Greyhawk. I know the little bit that they put into 5e, but that's about it. So I'm not going to try to write a campaign in Greyhawk without knowing anything about it. Do what you're comfortable with.
Or like, so down here it says Sith Iron Fist was talking about a Temeria campaign. That's where the Witcher is, right?
Sure.
That's where the Witcher is from, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to do that, then I would recommend reading the books,
Mm-hmm.
playing the games, like immerse yourself in that world so that you know what you're attempting to create.
Yeah.
And that's how I pick my favorite settings. Or like, so with my Eberron one, I've been tossing around. I'll let out a little like sneak peek. I've been tossing around.
Ooh, shh, everybody get quiet.
The idea. I've been tossing around the idea of making it a superhero themed campaign, because to me, I love superheroes. Most of the people that we play with all know that I work at a comic book store and I love comic books and know a lot about comic books. So incorporating those aspects into Eberron seemed like a good fit to me. Mm-hmm. So that's what I went with. And I went with something that I know, which is 5th edition and how Eberron works, plus something that I love to make my own unique take on Eberron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Squish things together. Steal things. Always steal things.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I definitely say make your own setting. Or, take one that's already made, tweak it a little bit, and then call it your own.
Absolutely.
How do you get over the trope of characters meeting in a tavern?
You don't. No, I'm just kidding.
This is Dungeons and Dragons. If your characters don't meet in a tavern, you're playing a different game.
So how I try to think of like, yes, you can always go try and true at the tavern, but if you want something different, that session 0 is a great way to figure out how to, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. It's a great way to figure out how they would meet in a different manner. Finding out. So like when we did Descent into Avernus, they have a whole like rollable chart as to how the characters know each other, but also Toto and Zatsa both decided that yes, they had previously known each other before this point, mm-hmm. which may influence how the beginning of the campaign went. Or think of other things that might. The whole party doesn't have to meet and converge all at the same place all at once. Mm-hmm. So another one that I really like was that I thought this was incredible. I was watching it was just another small stream. I believe it was but I think it was on YouTube. It was like a video on YouTube. This guy opened up the first session with it was a chase scene. It was a halfling being chased down like an alleyway with obviously something like a bag of something stolen, and some police were chasing after them. He runs into this other character who was, I believe it was a human fighter or barbarian, one of the two. And he tells the human to get out of my way, and continues to run. And but before he can do that, the fighter grabs onto him and he says, "Did you steal that bag?" And he goes, "I don't have time for this." He gives the whole spiel, but he convinces that fighter to help him fight off the police instead of giving him over to the police. And so I thought was a very unique way to bring these two party members together. So you just, as a DM, you have to think about those different options you have, which just comes with reading, writing, and stealing content.
Again, broken records.
Or like think about different ways that other characters that you, like I said, stealing things, other ways characters you love in any setting have met. So like in The Hobbit, they're celebrating a birthday party. Or The Hobbit, I'm sorry, Lord of the Rings. They're celebrating a birthday party. Or if you want to do The Hobbit, Gandalf shows up to Bilbo's house and then proceeds to just let like 12 dwarves into Bilbo's house unannounced, and that's how the party meets. Star Wars, Anakin literally on a completely different planet than Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and look how they met. Mm-hmm. So there's different ideas. You just have to find them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the best way to get rid of that player meeting trope.
Mm-hmm.
If you have any other ideas, that would be awesome, Kyle.
No, I totally agree with all of those. um, yeah, just watch stuff, read stuff, and just I like the idea of like when they make their characters, ask them their backstories, and then think about how those backstories would weave in and out of each other. Maybe they've just run into each other. If one of them is a bard who plays at a local tavern all the time, and the other one used to be a barkeep, be like, hey, maybe you were the barkeep at the bar that the bard always sang, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely look at that stuff, because you can always have a couple people know each other and stuff like that. That's one thing I've always liked about Critical Role's campaign, is how they get their characters together and stuff like that. But yeah.
And then I guess the last one is, what is our favorite pre-made module? Kyle, I've answered all of these first.
My favorite pre-made module, I haven't played a lot of modules. I have read like the concept and like read about most of them to just see what they are and that type of thing, just because I love knowing all that stuff. And it's going to sound super biased, but my favorite module, even after reading all of them and only playing the few I've had, is still Tomb of Annihilation. I love the open sandbox concept mode. Or that was a weird sentence. The sandbox, like the open concept of the game, where the players can do whatever they want to. They can go wherever they want to. They have a lot of control over the game, I feel like, and they do have a lot of control. So they can go wherever, they can do whatever they want to, and then you just throw in little tidbits every once in a while that lead them to the end of the campaign. I love that concept, especially going back to our derailing thing, that they can't really derail that module because they can do whatever they want to, and they're still going to go to the same ending. I love that idea. And I just like the story of it and where it goes and how it plays out and everything like that. I think it's a really good, a really well written module.
Absolutely. I DM'd Horde.
Mm-hmm.
I DM'd Descent. I play in Tomb. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones that I've played in. I know I've read about Storm King's Thunder because I found that one very interesting, but that's just because I think giants are cool. What else was there? Oh man, I don't know. Curse of Strahd. I haven't read about Curse of Strahd because I've known several people that want to DM it, so I don't want to know the information. But I started playing D&D with my dad when I was a kid. That's where I learned about D&D.
Oh, this nerd's gonna pull out some 1E campaign module, isn't he? Oh, jeez.
I was at the comic book store, which I spend a lot of time there, and they had a first edition Castle Ravenloft campaign come in that we bought off a collection, and I immediately bought it. I had no intention of not buying it, and I read through it, and it was just incredible. It was so cool to read something from, I want to say it came out in like the 80s, because I want to say first edition came out like mid 70s. And I loved it. I gave it to my dad and was like, Dad, the next time we get together, I really want to play this campaign. And so he's been reading over it as well so we can play it. And if Curse of Strahd is anything like Ravenloft, which I've only ever heard that it's a beautiful rendition of it, then I would think that Curse of Strahd will probably be my favorite campaign.
Nerd. Just had to go and pull out the first edition campaigns.
Look, I didn't mean to flex on you like that. I also am working on
wow.
Also at the store right now, I'm super excited. They have a whole slew of first edition books and stuff, and I really want to get my hands on the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook just to have them, because
that'd be cool.
They're just cool.
Yeah, definitely. But there's just so many options. It's hard to pick one. And there are some that are obviously better than others, but they're all pretty good. And they all have a different thing. Like there are some that are mostly role playing. Like we only played in it a little bit, but I've watched it a lot. I love Waterdeep too, just because half the time you're just role playing. And then there's ones like Dungeon of the Mad Mage, I guess, which is just connected to Waterdeep, but it's right after it, where it is all just one giant dungeon crawl for an entire book.
Right.
So, like, yeah, you just have to think about what you like to play and what your players want to play, and then that's the best way to pick, like, if you're picking a module to play as. But yeah, personally, Tomb of Annihilation.
Yep, and I'm gonna go with Castle Ravenloft until I get to play Curse of Strahd.
Cool. So yeah, that's all of our questions for this Coffee and Crits.
Yeah, does the chat have any like last second questions that they wanted to hit real quick before we say our goodbyes? Say it now or forever hold your peace. I guess we're good.
Okay, cool. You wanna do your shout out?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jacob Booten, as you guys can see in the overlay, and you can find me at JakeTheBard_ at all my social media, including here. I just started streaming a playthrough of Pokemon Sword, and I'll probably do some other video games coming up soon, I'm sure. If you liked what we did here today, you can always send in your messages to Saving Throws HQ at our Discord, or send them to us. So at Jake the Bard, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and here you can send me a message asking your questions, and I'm sure we'll answer them. I think our next campaign is Wednesday night, I believe. Or it might be, no, I think we shifted it to Tuesday so everyone could try to get to play because we have some crazy stuff going on next week. But I think that's pretty much everything. I'll leave everything else up to you, Kyle.
Yeah, I'm Kyle. I'm the other half of this Coffee and Grits. You can follow me at Winking Wizard on all social media. Yeah, be sure to follow Saving Throws as well, just so you don't miss any of our cool stuff that we got going on, with Tomb of Annihilation being sometime this week. We'll figure it out. I think you're right. I think it is Tuesday. And then we have Descent on... Do we not have Descent on Saturday this week?
I don't think that we do, because we're going to have a...
Is it this week or next week? That's all next week.
Oh, I think you're right. You're right.
So yes, Tomb should be on Wednesday, and then Descent will be on Saturday, and then we'll have another Coffee and Crits next Sunday. So be sure to send us your questions, because we need some more now. You can go to our Discord. There's a button on our Twitch page to link you over to it. You can join it and ask us any questions you want to. You can ask them here on Twitch. You can ask them on Facebook. You can ask them on Twitter. We don't care. Just get them to us so we can add them to our next Coffee and Crits. So yeah, anything else, Jacob?
No, I think that's good. I'm super excited to play on Wednesday, and can't wait to see you guys.
Cool. All right.
RPG Chick says we lost audio, but I'm not really sure. RPG Chick says JK, never mind. Cool.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.